Well, several people asked for it, and now it exists. So we are officially live with our Patreon. We have 4 tiers. There is the Frans.
Which is a capitalized version of Frans.
Heckin' Frans.
Heck.
And the Best Frans Squad. And when you join, you will be able to read the little story about why Frand. And you will also get access immediately to our Discord channel. So that is where we hope you will come hang out with us and have a good time. And we hope to have occasional community events going on and all kinds of stuff. So even if you are not familiar with Discord, you can totally make an account and we can absolutely help you get used to it. It is a great platform these days for connecting with friends. Frans. And heck. And doing all kinds of fun stuff like streaming and playing games together and just chatting. And there's lots of fun bots and we'll have some of those. So feel free to join us. You can join for as little as $5 a month. And you can also donate as much as you want. Anything above $77 a month gets you into our inner circle Best Frans Squad, and that will be where you get access to the inner workings of my brain.
Yep. It's a blessing and a curse.
But yeah, we also have cool stuff like our bloopers. You'll get access to Living Luna After Dark at certain tiers. Definitely, that is for adults.
We're assuming people who are getting on Patreon have the capability to use a credit card, in which case most likely will be an adult.
Correct. So. Yeah, hope you will join us there. We're excited. And yeah, help pay for a better chair and closet setup for us so we can record more podcasts. So what's today's topic?
So, today's topic is, well, I mean, it makes sense. It's all about authenticity. But it's also like the path to get there. Because a lot of people, it's in our natural development stages. Like when we're teenagers, our brains are wired to where we want to fit in with people. And, I mean, we want to be close to our attachment figures when we're younger, so we'll listen to whatever they have to say. And there's just a lot that is, making us just try to fit in instead of exploring what makes us uniquely us. And so the path to realizing that you've not been true to yourself for the purpose of pleasing other people, or because you're autistic and you're masking. You don't have to be autistic to feel this sort of concept of fitting in for so long that you...
well, everyone masks.
Well, everyone has a persona.
Well... So I guess, masking is a term that we specifically refer to commonly when we're talking about autism, but I believe we all have masks we wear. Like, you would not show up to your grandma's house and be like, yo, Granny, what's up? I was doing this fucking rad thing earlier, and you... I remember actually talking about that in school. We talked about how we have different masks we wear for different situations. Now, when you are an autistic individual and you're masking, it's complete social masking, like hiding stims and hiding, all those social aspects that feel uncomfortable. But even... What's the opposite of autistic? There's a
Allistic?
Word. Say it again.
Allistic?
Yeah.
Allistic.
I think everybody has masks that they have learned to wear in certain situations, whether it's, around their parents or around a certain relative or a boss or whatever. So.
Right. I just think that from what I've read and experienced and heard from other autistics is the fact that masking is a much more intense thing than having a mask. So I just want us to be aware of, different language stuff. So, today we'll be saying mask when we are referring to just the basic concept of fitting in and acting different around other different social situations, whether you are autistic or not. But masking, that phrase I will use in terms to my autistic experience and how that has affected me, and how it can also affect other autistics. I'm a stickler about language, if you couldn't tell.
And that's all good. And I know that you and I have a lot of conversations about different language use and whatnot. And a story that comes to mind with language differences is my first long-term partner used the word toboggan to mean a hat. And I had never heard of a toboggan. Like, it was a beanie to me. And he called it a toboggan. And
I thought that was a sled.
Yeah. And I had never really heard the word before. So I Googled it, and it was a sled. And it's regional differences. So there are regional differences in words. There's cultural differences in words. There's
cultural appropriation of words.
Right. There's your own inner experience of words. So yeah, when I'm using mask, I'm using it to mean the general what anyone can do. I remember there was a group therapy activity where they literally used masks, and you would paint on the outside the face that you normally show the world, and then on the inside it was like what you really feel inside. And it was
powerful.
It was done in I think a teen therapy group, and it was just really heartbreaking because a lot of times the face that we present to the world is one that's often happier or more adjusted or calmer or whatever than our inner experience might match up with. So one of the stories that I wanted to bring up in this episode was a personal experience of remembering one of the times I really ended up putting on a mask or not being authentic to myself, which was when I was a public school teacher. And I remember we were sitting around the lunch table, and one of the teachers said, "There's a kid out today for a religious holiday. Like, they sent in a note and everything, but there's no holiday today for a religion." And it was the fall equinox. So I interjected, and I was like, well, there is a holiday today. It's the fall equinox that's celebrated by people who might be part of earth-based spiritualities or, Wheel of the Year traditions, which, of course, I am. And this teacher, kind of gave me a look. And I don't even think she asked, what the holiday was about or anything. But she immediately, looked disgusted, and she's like, "That's not a real holiday." And, basically, that family must be abusing their child.
Oof.
And I just shut down. I was like, well, I'm never going to share anything about myself with this teacher. Because that level of judgment about a fall holiday, she would have...
A holiday?
A holiday. Oh, she would have flipped shit, though, if she knew that I was polyam, if she knew, that I participated in Wheel of the Year traditions, if she knew that I was queer, because I was still closeted at that time, she wouldn't have been able to handle it, it didn't seem like. So when people make these harmful comments, we are automatically going to put a mask on.
Yeah. If you care what they think.
Right. Yes. But most of us do care what other people think until we've done a lot of the deep work.
I enjoy when there's not rapport built with someone who will take that who will make that judgmental comment about something that I know affects me, and I'll be like, well, I'm this, and see them be like, oh shit, like.
Can you think of an example where that happened? I'm just curious if this is wishful thinking of your inner badass.
Right, because I often will be like, man, in this situation, I would totally be this level of vulnerable and authentic. I can just picture it now, and then in real life, it doesn't happen as much as
I mean, it's hard. It's really hard. Like, I could have in that moment been like, well, I celebrate that holiday, but I'm here at work today because I have no other choice.
I think it's more happened to me when I was in a more judgmental space, where I would say kind of a broad, generalized judgment about a religion, or I might even catch myself, like, based off of my own experiences with, it's mostly having to do with religion. So, like, if you know a person, but not super well, and you might be complaining about your past experiences with, like, I might complain about the concept of eventual God or all of that, and they might, well, I actually converted to Catholicism, a few months ago, and that actually happened recently, and I felt utterly terrible about the fact that I was complaining, or it was just a tough spot to realize, like, my thoughts and beliefs are true, but I also didn't necessarily I wasn't necessarily bashing, like, how dare they be Catholic, because I'm sure that, there are different, the organized religion itself, I don't necessarily enjoy, but there are plenty of people in the religious sects that are lovely people who thankfully don't take the religion so far that it harms other people. But
right. Using religion as as an excuse to harm people is never okay. But I think there's value in almost all religions. Mm-hmm. I say that knowing that there are religions that are cult-based and take advantage of people and do actively harm them if they're a member of it. But, 99% of religions have merit to them. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like in the scheme of people feeling like they have to put on a mask or hide some aspect of their identity, like, it is best for us to try to be mindful and ask questions before we share opinions that could be harmful to them.
Yeah. I think a lot of time, I don't know if it's just, I saw a TikTok the other day of someone being like, this is my autistic sense of humor. And it's very similar to how I consider my sense of humor to be, especially when it came to calling people out on those sort of, like, I remember, like, when the your mom jokes were a thing. Mm-hmm. And I would often use those as an in to throw that I'm adopted, like, at people. And they would be like, what? Like, that would be my way to kind of have this this was my version of dark humor, I guess. Because at one point, like, one person was like, your mom, and I'm like, I'm adopted, and this is middle school. It's like, your mom, your dad, you started saying those back to each other, and I was like, your dad, and they're like, my dad's in jail, and it got real awkward between the two of us because we were like, oh gosh, we were trying to diss each other, but actually it's a lot worse than that. Right.
When you're trying to diss each other, but the trauma is just so much bigger.
But the truth is a lot worse than the actual joke. Yeah, so the whole concept of building a mask around hearing other people, because that also happens in families that who just kind of talk around the dinner table about their judgments of certain populations. And if you find yourself, like, especially, I've heard plenty of friends be like, well, I know that my parents are homophobic.
I have several clients that are coming to mind right now that literally, like, have not come out yet because they've heard their parents and their extended families talk shit about queer people and trans people, especially. Like, it makes sense. Another form of masking that I think is really, well, not masking, but mask.
Yeah, putting a mask on. Yeah.
Feel free to cut that.
Yeah.
Another mask that I want to bring up is trauma mask. Like, we will, because I did this for years. I had so many people tell me, oh my God, your relationship is like the best relationship I've ever seen. But behind the scenes, it was the worst relationship you could possibly see. Well, not the worst, I'm sure, but pretty damn bad. Like, every category of abuse was happening. So the fact that people outside were like, wow, it's so great, shows that I was doing a really good job of putting that face on and pretending I was okay and pretending everything was all right. So people that are being abused often have to put a mask on to hide that reality because of the fear of, you know, not being believed, which is massive, because it happens all the time.
Because usually the abuser is very charismatic and a lovely, like I don't know how it happens, but I guess it's like the power dynamic is they gain power in the community, and so everyone knows them outside of the relationship, just one-on-one in their charismatic self, and so they're like, there's no way that this person
and
could be like that.
I've worked with so many people with the same damn story that it's like, you know, we finally got divorced, I'm away from this person now, but like I lost all of my friends because they think I'm evil for divorcing this person, and because they're such a good person, because they do all these great things. Like, it's repetitive. And what is unfortunate is that in the process of putting the face on as the person experiencing the abuse, we're just reinforcing the image that they're a good person. Because and which, again, we can't help but do if we're terrified and feeling like we need to be protected through that. But in the end, like, that's part of, I think, the reason that it's hard for other people to believe. Because they're like, but you looked so happy. You looked so at peace, right? Like, you all posted all these wonderful things on social media of all the great things that you were doing. And
social media.
Social media is a huge mask for people. Like, I love the, I don't know if you've ever seen the, like, side-by-side Instagram comparisons, that it's like, this is what you see on Instagram, but this is what was really happening. Like, how posed and fake a lot of those pictures are. There's
been that sort of movement in the, like, the bodybuilder community, because a lot of people are like, man, I really want a six-pack, but like when I roll in bodybuilders and people who are very fit are trying to build awareness and being like, this is what I look like when I flex, this is what I look like every other this is what I look like after I eat, this is what I look in, and they're like showing like your belly naturally puffs out when you relax your stomach. You're not going to tense your abs all day. Like, all of that stuff is a thing that, thankfully, a lot of people in the strength community are being like, hey, let's bash these ideas of what a person who has muscles is supposed to look like 24/7.
Yeah, I'm seeing the same with certain influencers, showing, made up faces versus not made up faces, and poses that make them look thinner versus how they normally look, like just kind of airing that out. Because, I mean, it's fine if we want to pose for a photo, but it's not fine if we sell that as the only standard of what people can look like. Because, like, I'm having this conversation with a teenage girl right now that is, restricting eating and not breathing correctly because she's been told her whole life, like, suck in your gut. Because people prize thinness.
Mm-hmm.
And
apparently you're always being watched. Just make sure that your gut is sucked in 100% of the time.
Right. And that's another mask, right? Like, you're literally putting a mask on your body. You're contorting your body into a shape that it's not naturally supposed to be in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's really hard. So, yes, we can go down this path of, like, giving all of these different examples to Kingdom Come and then all forever because, they just are so prevalent. But what is it like to start discovering and experimenting with who you actually are once you are not feeling like you need to mask as much?
Well, the question I always ask myself, and I encourage people I work with to ask, is, am I enjoying myself?
Mm-hmm.
Is this enjoyable? And I always explain, like, there are going to be things that we don't enjoy doing.
What? You don't like washing the dishes?
Ugh, that's always the example I give too. But yeah, like,
because we hate it.
Thank you, Justin. I love you. But yeah, like, for certain things for health, we have to do them, right? Mm-hmm. Like, if we want our teeth not to fall out, we need to floss and rinse and brush and things like that. If we don't want roaches and other bugs to build up in our house, we need to make sure that our sinks are clean and our dishes are washed and we take the trash out. We're probably not going to enjoy doing those, but
adulting sucks.
Because adulting does suck.
Yep.
But anytime we're with someone, doing an activity, spending time with ourselves, like anything where we actively have a choice that's not related to health, mm-hmm. We need to be asking, like, am I enjoying myself? So if we're hanging out with a person that we always have to put a mask on around and we have to pretend that we're something we're not and someone we're not and people please them, chances are we're not really enjoying ourselves. Mm-hmm. Like, chances are that feels uncomfortable and it feels wrong on some inner level. So
and that's often, like, in terms of anxiously attached to the idea of being this person's friend, can cause you to focus so much on what you could be doing right or wrong and be hyper focused on what the person is doing around you or not doing around you, and then you'll start making your own conclusions as to, like, well, they did this, does this mean they're interested in hanging out with me, or are they just zoned out, like, am I interesting enough? All of these different questions and catastrophizations. Are you so worried about how you're presenting to them that you're not really being you?
Right. Yeah, I can think of several friends I had in the past where I was so concerned about how they perceived me that, like, anytime I would see them, I would have to put makeup on, and wear certain shirts and put on, like, are they called Spanx?
I think so, yeah.
Like the things that suck in your gut and, like, smooth your hips and stuff.
Yeah.
Because I was so worried about how they would perceive me. And that doesn't feel good. Like, who likes being in tight clothes?
But here's the thing. I've heard this from people before, and I feel this myself, is when you are in a mask and someone rejects you, they are rejecting the mask. Mm-hmm. So it's a twinge less painful. It's still painful as fuck, but it's a twinge less painful than if you offered your authentic self to them and they rejected that.
Yeah. And so that's the thing I always reinforce to people is, like, if someone doesn't like you for you, fuck them. Like, okay, but not literally. Like, they're not for you. If you are fucking them and they don't like you for you, please stop.
Unless it's a fuck that you just, are not doing for the personality aspect. It's just a good fuck and you are respecting yourselves past
If
that.
it's actually respectful to you, which I find often it's not. But anyway, yeah, like if somebody doesn't like you for your authentic self, then that just means they're not a good fit for you, and it's okay to move on. And you don't have to judge yourself or them as good or bad or right or wrong. Mm-hmm. Like I have to commend on some level. Okay, you might have to cut this because this might be too controversial.
Okay.
The whole Freedom Convoy flying their giant flags, I have to commend them at least for not putting on a mask. They are showing the world exactly who they are.
Mm-hmm. That, and I can judge them as a little bit.
They're not for me.
Nope.
They're not for me, and that's okay.
I am chuckling a little bit over the fact that this trucker convoy that's driving many miles is doing this when gas is $5 a gallon.
I know. But yeah, they're not for me. They're not for me. But I think the commending aspect of it is like, I mean, yes, I've been late to my therapy session because I've gotten stuck behind the convoy, and that has been a little upsetting. I had to skip church.
Yeah. So it's been it gets in the way a little bit, but it's not, as I haven't heard it being violent. It's very loud. Like there's a lot of messages on the trucks. But I don't know if there's been harmful messages that are like anti a population. I haven't really looked at it that much, and if there is, I'm very sad if there is. But
yeah, like I would definitely not commend them at all if any individual is touting hatred.
Yeah. If it's about them being like, I want it's about the mask mandate.
I think that's part of what it originally was. And also the gas prices ? Which makes no sense given the prices. But anyway. The point being, like, people who are not afraid to be themselves without hurting others or talking down about others. Like, you know what?
I did look into the windows of most of these cars and trucks, and most of them are white, middle-aged men.
And their wives.
Yeah. And so it's kind of like, with that privilege, people are like, I can afford to be myself.
I can afford to not put a mask on here and just present myself in my views to the world, which unfortunately that's definitely a thing. Like, people without privilege have to put masks on more often.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's so, as to white people, we have our, we have the struggles of neurodivergence and queerness and, non-American religion, I guess. I don't know how to explain. Like, it's neo.
No, I mean, it was founded in the U.S. So
okay, well, like neo-Christian, but it's not like Christianity that
there is no American religion.
I know, as America claims.
If we were also a person of color, people of color, of any color other than white, we would probably not have had access to the level of technology that we have, the loose funds, the support systems that we've had, potentially the education. Like,
yeah, there's a lot less. There's a lot less currently against us, as much as we are in minorities and other sects.
Yeah, and like, I wonder, for example, a lot of people came to me when I was working in agency settings for help with technology, for help with understanding the LGBTQ population, and I wonder if that would have been approached any differently had I not been white, But
Yeah, and I also saw a TikTok of like how white voices are sometimes overshadowing, or often overshadowing, people of color's voices that are in the same minority groups, like people of color who are queer, people of color who are neurodivergent, who are disabled in some way. Like, the white voices are the ones that people want to listen to more. I don't like it, even though we don't necessarily have much to offer in terms of point of view.
Yeah, and that's actually something that I wrote about on Patreon, is that I'm hoping we can genuinely use where we are on our platform. I'm going to use the metaphor of a platform here, to eventually have the resources to lift BIPOC people and, you know, people with more visible physical disability and things like that up onto the platform with us, like actually literally by giving them money, by giving their voice a place to literally be the voice of the podcast or of an article or whatever, where we're just asking questions and facilitating it, because I think that that's something really, really important.
That is so important. Yeah.
And we can sit here and talk forever, but we can't speak on so many different topics because they're not ours.
Yeah. And there are so many.
So many topics.
So many topics.
So that's going to be season 2. That's my hope. If not, if things go a little slower, maybe season 3. But
yeah,
that's our eventual goal.
And I mean, I'm hoping to, you know, find BIPOC voices and lift them up in terms of like providing their TikTok handle or their podcast title or whatever, like other places that you can find these people who are also trying to, you know, educate and inform people and validate people.
Right.
Yeah.
So many people with important messages to share that, again, just might not have access to the technology or want to be valued for their time, right? I'm using general we, not me and Ikenna, but we as white people often expect Black people, for example, to explain why Black Lives Matter is important. And that's like exhausting. And we're expecting them to do it for free, on the fly, like on the spot. And it's just ridiculous.
Just go.
The emotional labor.
There are so many wonderful resource compilations that have been made during the, you know, initial, I mean, all the time. I'm sure these compilations are made all the time, no matter whether a tragic event started the movement or if they're just in, you know, someone just wanted to make the compilations of resources that will explain those things.
Yeah.
Like there's the White Fragility book, there's the All About Race book. Like there's so many different books out there that
My
are written by
Grandmother's Hands.
Yeah. That are written by BIPOC people that are so informative that they have used their time, and you can support them monetarily for that time.
And I know we're going off on a tangent here, but
I'm just so passionate about
I know.
this.
Like the reason why monetary support is so important is money is energy. And if we are not flowing our money where we actually care to build others up that don't have access to resources,
right,
they are going to lack the ability to live within, you know, a life that they'll truly be happy in and have equal access or equitable access to things. So it is really important to support.
Yeah. So yes, non sequitur, important passion, like values, beliefs that, you know, I probably will go down like a lot of times because it's just a thing that I have on my mind a lot. But just in terms of like going back to unmasking and like the vulnerability of unmasking, it is a process. It's not something, and a lot of people in the autistic community are usually like, I feel like I was less autistic before my diagnosis, and now that I was given the diagnosis, I've become more autistic. And it's like, hon, that's you unmasking.
Right.
Like, that's you giving yourself permission to be more, and masking is also kind of a privilege in a way with some autistic populations, because there are, you know, autistics out there that struggle more or have more disabilities comorbid with their autism that makes them not really able to do the same types of masking or level of masking or have the awareness of masking that other autistics do. So masking is still hard, and it's also hard when you, like, the immediate discrimination that happens and judgment that happens because you are unable to mask, because of either a super low window of tolerance and you're at autistic burnout, or you just have so many more needs for supports and you just are struggling. Like, you don't really, you just need what you need, and you're going to have feelings about it and express it externally to the point where people are worried about your safety, sort of thing. So it's like, so yeah, masking in itself, as hard as it is, as hard as it is to unmask as well, you know, I also wanted to give a little, you know, have people be aware that, like, autism is not a, like, there's a lot of different people with a lot of different supports. Everyone is unique in their own way. And so there are people that have the privilege, which sucks that masking is a privilege, but, like, to be able to, I guess, quote unquote, pass, and then, which has been detrimental to them over a period of time. And then they realize that they're autistic and they're like, oh gosh, now I can, like, unpeel all of these layers of armor. And the struggles that have happened with people who weren't able to mask as well. So
I wonder too, like, you saying, like, masking privilege. I am wondering, because you mentioned passing, and of course passing is a word we use in the trans community a lot. I wonder how many trans people end up putting on a face, a mask, that's not necessarily authentic to their identity, because they feel like they have to pass.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's definitely a bunch of people in the non-binary and queer Facebook groups that I'm a part of that will post pictures of themselves being like, am I non-binary enough? Am I queer enough?
Yeah.
You know, when first looking at me, do you see me as a certain gender? And it's like, I get where you're coming from, but at the same time, like,
Are you happy with you?
yeah, like, don't, like, this is the thing, is, like, masking comes from protecting ourselves from external judgment and also really wanting external validation. But authenticity starts with internal validation.
Right.
And internal love. And, I mean, like, I hate the whole phrase of, like, you can't love someone without loving yourself first. Like, I believe that you can grow with someone and have that happen over time together. Like, you don't have to just screw the idea of being in a relationship before you know, learn to love yourself, sort of thing. You can still do that in relationship, but it's still true in terms of being happy with yourself.
It grows our capacity for non-judgment, because the more that we love ourselves and accept ourselves, the less we're likely to judge others for being themselves. And I think that might be the core of that you can't love someone else until you love yourself may come from. It's kind of twisted from that. Like, you can't be in a state of non-judgment to others if you're still judging yourself, because you're reflecting that judgment outward into the world in a way.
In a therapist term, projecting.
Yeah, and projection's definitely real. But, like, if I hate myself because I'm fat, which I don't, for the record, if I hate myself for being fat, then how am I viewing all the other fat people in the world?
I mean, that's what internalized homophobia is, I think.
Right. Yeah. And man,
Oh,
like,
man.
I definitely had a lot of internalized homophobia for a very long time. And it would make me uncomfortable to see other queer people being out. Like, I was happy and uncomfortable at the same time because I was uncomfortable with me.
Yeah.
So the more that we can foster self-love and compassion and non-judgment and self-expression, the more we're going to support that in other people.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting too, because an interesting concept that there's when you discover your queerness, and if you fully embrace queerness, sometimes people go to the other end of the spectrum and are like anti-heterosexual and almost get a heterophobic concept because it's like, I want to be as queer as possible. And being hetero means I'm not queer. Or being in a hetero quote unquote passing.
I had friends that rejected me when I was in a straight passing relationship. So.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it's like, I've undulated in those spaces of being a cis, or thinking I was cis and straight, and having judgments about queer people up until I met more and realized I was. And then, and then in the queer space, I went a full 180 in terms of like hetero concepts. Like, I remember whenever straight passing people would kiss, I think I even did this with you and your ex, I was like, oh, gross hetero. Like, and of course the ex would get upset because he's pan, and he'd be like, no, not hetero. And I'm like, okay.
Well, I even remember early on in our relationship when I was just with you, I went through this like identity crisis. And I think part of that was an attempt to mask for you because there's so much biphobia in the world.
Yeah.
Bisexual people, because they experience attraction differently to different genders, like there's so many stereotypes about like, well, they're gonna cheat, they have to be in a relationship with all the genders, like all this bullshit, which I think is a part of the reason that the label was dismissed for like an entire decade practically.
Yeah.
But I was like, I must be a lesbian. There can be no hetero left in me. Like, I can't be attracted to men anymore.
Yeah.
And it was definitely like an attempt to put that mask on to please you, to think that I'm queer enough. Again, going back to that like enough concept.
Yeah, and you ended up internalizing that so much when I was starting to question my gender, so much to the point of, I have moments of wondering if I'm a trans man or if I am just more masculine, non-binary, like, and I can be non-binary and have different, I can still do hormone replacement therapy. I could still have different surgeries and still have the non-binary label. And so, but I remember bringing that up at one point, and you were struggling hardcore with the idea that I could potentially be a man.
Right, because then I was like, well, shit. Does that mean that I need to take this mask off and put another one back on? Like, ah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there are so many things that we can put masks on around, and, going back to that inner self-love and inner authority, right? Like, we're the authority on ourselves.
Right. And
we get to determine ourselves.
And I think it's interesting that you bring up the whole, like, putting on the mask for me is, when we care and love about people's love, we care and love for people, like, what we don't want to hurt them. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, if we're not being honest with them, like, you're just going to build up resentment, you're going to build up mask, You're not going to be truly happy
Right.
around the people you love because you're not being true around them.
You're enabling their expectations,
Yeah.
ultimately. And if someone has expectations of you, that's not actually okay. It's not okay for us to have expectations outside of agreements of other people. So, for example, we're married. So there is an agreement that we signed in law on paper that said, we are together until death do us part unless we want to split, and then we're going to have to really go through the process of doing that.
Yeah.
And with that, with that marriage and giving vows, we make certain agreements in those vows, which of course we can go back to the drawing board and we can discuss. But all of those agreements that we make are then allowed to be expectations because we've had the conversation and we've said, this is what I'm willing to bring to the table. Is that acceptable to you? And you say yes. And then you might say, well, are you willing to do this? And I might say no, or I might say yes, or I might say somewhere in between. But we make those agreements. But when you're just waltzing into a relationship with somebody and you expect them to be a certain way just because that's what you like, and it was never agreed upon, that's not okay. But there are a lot of people that will then realize those expectations and try to conform themselves or put that mask on to fit the expectations. And that is really uncomfortable.
Yeah. And that's why communication is such a big thing. Both of us were struggling in that when we were first together because we were both trying to just figure it all out. We were there was just a lot happening in our lives, and just explosions happening in our lives. So I was trying to get over the split that happened. You split with the ex 3 months after we started, 3 or 4 months after we started dating. It was just this constant level of,
we were wondering if we should move.
Yeah,
school, work, jobs, everything was in flux.
Yeah, so everything was in flux, and we, as much as we worked on communicating, there was still a lot that we weren't necessarily. So I might have said some things in passing that caused the expectation around your mask to start to form. But I wasn't necessarily you need to be this for me. Outright. It was just...
But even just hearing those fears or concerns or desires from people that we love can automatically elicit that people-pleasing response that many of us have been raised with.
Yeah, and it's the same concept with if your parents are homophobic and they start hearing those fears or being oh, I'm so glad my kids aren't blah, 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 or if my kid was blah, 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 this is what would happen. Hearing those fears and whatnot, and I was still processing the breakup. So I was just listing off all of these things that I was struggling with or had struggled with in the past relationship, even though I was just so hijacked with feelings. So it wasn't necessarily coming from a healthy place, and you were hearing all of that and being oh shit,
I better shape up if I want to stay with them, basically, is that response, because we do love and care about people and we want to keep them in our lives. But that can't always be the case, and us be able to be authentic. So yay us for being able to work through that. And
it's taken a long time, because it's you realizing the mask and you having to explain it to me a bit and being this is actually who I am, and I think I did this out of fear of this, and and then I had to go through the whole process of getting to learn more about your authentic self outside of that mask and what that would mean for our relationship. And so it's not, again, it's not going to we're not responsible for other people's feelings, as hard as it is, because people are going to have feelings around, if you are a friend or in a relationship with somebody and you realize that there's a mask and you tell them and you explore your unmasked self around them, they're going to have feelings and reactions around this new authentic aspect of you. May ask for clarification. They may feel certain, like there's all of these different things that'll be going through their head. But ultimately, they need to get in touch with like why they're feeling those things, like what they might need to go to therapy, like.
But yeah, if they don't love authentic you, then they're not for you. And that can be really hard, but we have to give people the chance to see us. Yeah. And see if they respect us.
And it's our choice in the end. So
unless they're abusive. Yeah. Then don't. Then just don't.
Yeah. And that's the thing is it's your choice. We're saying as people who are currently still working on it, but we have experienced being, very masked, like weighed down by tons of masks, and are slowly stripping them away and realizing the freedom that it causes. But we are also aware that it's not easy. It's not a one-step process, and you are okay if you feel safe in this moment for keeping a mask for a little bit. We're not blaming or judging you or anything for that. Like, we want you to...
There's reasons they're there.
Yeah. Masks are there to protect us, but if you're in a space that you're able to be able to shed one of those and experiment with what really makes you happy, like, go for it.
And if you don't have a therapist and that's something that you want to work on, like, consider finding a therapist, because that's one of the great things to work on in therapy. If you're like, oh, well, I don't have, a whole trauma history that I want to work on, or maybe you do have trauma history, but you're not ready to go there. Maybe you can work on how you show up for different groups of people and how you present differently, those faces or masks that you might wear at different times, and work on slowly dismantling those or understanding why you put them in there in the first place.
Yeah, since the therapeutic relationship is for you to experiment with those things. Ultimately.
Some people still mask with therapists. Like, they will literally lie to their therapists and say, oh, I'm not feeling that way, or no, that didn't happen, or whatever, because they're afraid to be in that.
Or it's a defense mechanism. Like, they're wanting to deny things because if they say it in the space, it'll be true.
Yep. And we can want to, quote unquote, please our therapists by showing that we're making so much progress and we're so healthy. But
we're doing therapy correctly.
But there is no right way other than just trying to show up as you.
Yeah, just be in the space. And, I mean, your therapist will probably call you out the more they get to know you. Like, I cry all the time, and my therapist will tell that I'm holding back tears, and she's like, the whole side of your face is just bright red, as if you're holding something back, and then I'll just sob.
Heckin' red boy.
Yeah. So to finish up, unmasking is hard. Recognizing your masks is hard, but hopefully just knowing, like, if there are aspects of yourself that you realize that you are doing not for you, but for somebody else.
It's not bringing you joy.
And it's not bringing you joy. Like, that is something that you can explore and see if you want to kind of redirect that and see what that means for you in the future. Like, what you actually might want to do.
You are beautiful as yourself. We believe in you.
We do.
Because we, at Living Luna, love.
Oh, God.
Unashamed. And nurture authenticity.
I swear you use nurture every time.
Normalize.
Yep.
I think I literally put in our graphics nurture.
Oh, no.
Because maybe it needs to be nurture instead of normalize. Maybe that's what my gut's telling me.
Is that right?
Yep. Luna stands for whatever you need it to. Love, uniqueness.
Llamas.
Llamas
understand nudity. Always.
Living llamas. Understanding nudity always.
No, living Luna.
Yeah,
Llamas.
living, because when you read the whole acronym out, it would be living llamas.
No, it's not. It's living Luna. That's the acronym. It's Luna.
Yeah.
So living
llamas. Understanding. Yeah, that's what I said.
Oh, I see. We have to be correct on this acronym.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, if you are a graphic designer and want to create a bumper sticker of living llamas understanding nudity always, that would be great.
Have a great day, y'all.
Bye.